But it was I had 20 Republicans wait at 1:30 a.m. to hear me speak, and then fist bump me for saying it, and they voted the other way. Like, they know that much in their hearts that I'm right. But they're waiting to see what happens to me. I had one come up to me and say, I want to vote like you, but I don't think I can get reelected if I do that. And he said, I was inspired by Ron Paul, and I thought I would come here and do this, but I see no way I could get reelected. So we have to give, if I win my reelection, that gives these folks more confidence. Yeah, we need to get better people elected, that's true, but these are good people that get elected, and then they get there and they lose their nerve. They're not all sellouts. Some of them are just scared. So that's why I'm here asking for your help, and appreciate you helping me out. I want to tell you a couple more Trump stories, because it's not all hate. Sometimes it's love. He's hot and cold. Last week, when he came to speak to our Republican conference, it was a private meeting with 220 Republican congressmen, where he was pitching the big, beautiful bill. And I don't think he thought I would show up to that meeting. And he said, is Tom Massie here? And I raised my hand and looked him in the eye. He's like, oh, there's Tom Massie. And he goes, he's basically, he and Rand Paul are very similar. They got the same hair. They're both from Kentucky. And you can't get them to vote for anything. He said, actually, that's not true. I like Thomas Massie's hair better. Anyway, but, and then he mentioned my name 7 times and spent 15 minutes of his hour and a half talking about me. So when people say I'm ineffective and I'm not moving the needle, we're told we're going to vote on rescissions next week, and that is because I basically showed Elon Musk that they were lying to him, and I shamed Russ Vought, the OMB director at the White House, and I shamed Mike Johnson, and they just want the phone calls to stop. And it's not like phone calls from just regular Joes. It's like billionaires who gave to Trump. They gave him $10 million in super PACs, and they're like, WTF? What are you doing? And so that's why they're doing this, is because we're putting the heat on them. And so anyways, the other story I wanted to tell you is Bobby Kennedy. We invited him to the Judiciary Committee along with Tulsi Gabbard when they were still Democrats. And they were getting censored and cut out of the debates on the Democrat side. And we were in the majority, so we called them as witnesses to the Judiciary Committee. Jim Jordan is the chairman, and we allowed them to testify. And I already knew Tulsi Gabbard from the House, when we served together. But I got to know Bobby Kennedy, and then he's also, basically the Pope of the Maha movement now. He's the highest ranking official, but that's what I've been doing forever. I mean, when I first got to Congress, I did R&D to come up with my bills. I ripped off and duplicated Ron Paul's bills, right? That's what R&D stands for, rip off and duplicate. I introduced his hemp bill, his raw milk bill, he's in the Fed bill, his audit the Fed bill, and things like that. But anyways, Bobby Kennedy, when he basically combined with Trump, he wanted to be HHS secretary, but he also wanted me to be the ag secretary, because you can't have healthy people without healthy food, right? You can go after big pharma, but you also have to, have good food in this country, and allow small farmers to produce it locally. And so we were working on a plan, Bobby Kennedy and his people and me, for me to be ag secretary. They were working on it harder than me. And they were pushing this. And I finally told Bobby Kennedy, I said, I don't think this will work. He said, why? I said, because I have never endorsed Trump. And there's no way in hell he's going to appoint anybody who didn't endorse him. And Rand's never endorsed him. We say nice things about him, and I would have, but they had done so much work to try to get me to be ag secretary Bobby Kennedy said, it sounds like you need to endorse him. I said, okay, I'll do it. How do I do it? He said, come to Wisconsin and get on the stage with me in Tulsa and we'll announce it. So I'm looking at tickets thinking, I don't want to go to Wisconsin. I sat in my hotel room. This was at the Weston A. Price thing that Bob was at. So I wrote an endorsement of Trump. I just tried it out in my head. I wrote it out. What would this sound like? And then I had my scheduler looking at plane tickets to go to Wisconsin. And I found a message that Trump had left when my wife passed away last summer. And it was a very sincere, very nice message. And I thought, well, I'll call this number and talk to his staff and work out this endorsement and the travel arrangements. So I pressed the number, and on the second ring, I hear, hello, this is Donald. I'm like, what the fuck? He's 2 weeks away from prison or president. And he answered my call on the second ring. So I was sitting in my boxers and a t-shirt on a hotel bed with the president, 2 weeks from the election with the president, he wasn't the president yet, but former president on the line. Oh my God. So I was a little taken off guard and wasn't ready to talk to him. But I just thanked him for the message he left about my wife. And he said, that's a hard one. That's a very hard one. Arnold Palmer, he played around a lot, but he did love his wife. So when she passed away, it almost killed Arnie. And I'm thinking, why do I have to know about Arnold Palmer? I just want to endorse him. It's very tough, but Arnie got through it. 5 years later, he remarried. It was very hard on Arnie, but you're a tough cookie like Arnie, and so you'll make it through this. And then Trump said, I take it back. You're much tougher than Arnie ever was. And then he goes, you're a sharp cookie too. You went to MIT. I'm like, does he have my bio on the phone? He said, my uncle is Professor John G. Trump. He taught at MIT 41 years. It's a record. He said, I've got the best genetics. And I was like, is this happening? So I thought, I would love to just keep talking to him like this. But I know at some point somebody's going to grab him and get him off his phone. And he's going to be, okay, bye. So I said, well, let me get to the point. The reason I'm calling you is it's a close race in the purple states, and I think you could use some help from libertarians. And if I endorsed you, I think it might help. So I want to endorse you. Oh, this is wonderful. This is marvelous. And I said, well, how do we announce it? And he said, oh, just retweet it. I'll just tweet it. I'll retweet you. I'll put it on Truth Social. We can get it out there for you. There's like 10 people on Truth Social. But he volunteered to retweet my tweet if I would tweet it. And I said, so, okay, well, I want to make sure you're okay with what I say. What do you want me to say in it? He said, well, I spoke at the Libertarian Convention and they loved me. Now, if you watched it or if you were there, it was mostly booing. But he was right about the next part. He said, that kid is locked up for 100 years. When I said I was going to free him, they all applauded. He said, put that in your endorsement. The libertarians will love it. He was talking about Ross Ulbricht. Yeah. By the way,
is that the January 6th?
Ross Ulbricht ran the website Silk Road and got put away for 2 life sentences plus 40 years. By the way, so in the middle of my endorsement of Trump is this sentence, and he will free Ross Ulbricht, right? And he's going to make America great, and he's going to free Ross Ulbricht. It didn't fit, but I went ahead and put it in there. And he did retweet it, which basically locked him into doing that.
Yeah.
And so Ross's mom called me up and thanked me, and he did. All Ross wanted was a commutation, and he actually gave him a full pardon, which means he's, it's like he never did it. He can own a gun, he can go anywhere he wants, And so I took Ross to the State of the Union this year. So that was pretty cool, as a free man.
Awesome.
So he was a journalist?
So he goes, I said, okay, I know what to write. Who do I run it by? He's like, I got Dan Scavino on the plane. I'm gonna give you to Dan. We're on the plane to go tape the Joe Rogan show. And at this point, I'm like, shit, he's on an airplane wasting time. So I could hear him hand the phone to Joe Rogan. He goes, Joe, this is a tough cookie. Thomas Massie, very tough endorsement to get. I just got his endorsement. Don't fuck it up.
So good.
So 2 weeks after the election, I'm trying to he hasn't appointed Bobby. He hasn't appointed. I don't even think he knew I wanted to be Ag Secretary because I kept getting shot down in the circle. The Palace Guard would veto my name. They wouldn't even give it to Trump. So Mark Meadows, his former chief, said, just call Trump and ask him. Just tell him you're interested in a job. He'll respect that. So I called up Trump, and he called me back within 45 minutes. And it was about, as I said, I want to talk about cabinet secretaries and whatever. And he's like, so he runs through all his considerations and asks me my opinion. What about Rubio? Would he be good, Secretary of State? And I don't like Rubio, so I said, well, he'd be pretty good, I guess. And he said, what about Matt Gaetz? And I said, I love Matt Gaetz. Like, I served next to him on Judiciary, and he's smart, he's quick. I think he'd be great. And Trump says, well, the DOJ made my life a living hell several years. I think I should let them try it a few years. Well, Matt Gaetz didn't make it. And then he asked me, he said, what about Bobby? Is he too much? Is he too much for HHS? And I said, what do you mean? He said, don't you think we need some vaccines? No. And I said, well, I don't think he wants to ban all the vaccines. And by the way, you can put the craziest son of a bitch you can find at the head of any of these agencies. And all those people are so dug in, you can change it maybe 1 or 3%. And he said, do you know Bobby? And I said, yeah. He said, are you friends with Bobby? And I said, yeah. He said, call him up, tell him to get ready. So as soon as I hung up with Trump, I called Bobby Kennedy and I said 2 things. Trump thinks you want to ban all the vaccines. I never said that. And I said, well, you need to straighten that out because he's about to pick you. And so he called up Trump and Trump picked him the next day. So I didn't get a job, but I got to tell Bobby Kennedy he had a job. So anyways, I'm actually glad that I'm still in Congress because there's still nobody. I'm still hoping every year there'll be somebody who will sign up for the ass whipping I've been taking every week. But I haven't found one yet. And I've been fighting not just on the spending, but on COVID. I fought that. When I was subcommittee chair last Congress, I brought in the 2 vaccine experts that quit under Biden because they didn't agree with the full approval of the vaccine, and they didn't agree with doing an emergency use authorization of the booster. And they were told, I got them to tell me under oath, I deposed them. They told me under oath that they were told from the very top that they had to approve this vaccine, give it full approval so that it could be mandated. And they quit. And by the way, then I brought their boss in, who's corrupt, Peter Marks, and under RFK Jr., he's been fired. But I exposed him in that hearing, and in the hearing, I asked the guy who had 30 years of vaccine expertise. He's got 5 degrees, 30 years of experience in vaccine approval, worked at the FDA, drinks the Kool-Aid, right? Probably had every vaccine that's available. And I asked him under oath in public hearing, I said, did you take the booster? And he said no. He didn't even take 1 booster. And he was like the number 2 scientist. The number 1 quit as well, but the number 2 scientist, and he never took the booster. He said, I didn't need it. You don't need it. Like even, assuming you drink the Kool-Aid, he still said you don't need a booster. Anyways, I've been fighting on that and for food freedom, trying to make it easier we've got, I call it the industrial meat complex. 4 companies control 85% of the meat market. It's bad for farmers, it's bad for consumers, and the USDA is a captured regulatory agency. The meat monopoly, two of which are foreign companies, are in charge of meat in the United States. They basically want more regulation to keep out the little guys, but it's not regulation that keeps you safer or makes the food any safer. Anyways, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, this is one of the reasons I'm on Judiciary Committee. Also, intellectual property, because nobody in Congress understands it. When they put me on the Judiciary Committee, there were a lot of the lawyers on that committee looking at me. They're like, well, you're not even a lawyer. And I said, look, I was on the Science Committee for a while, and I saw what passes for credentials up here. So they don't give me any crap anymore. Let's take some questions. Now, tariffs. So here's what I say. If you would replace the income tax with a flat tariff, I would go for it. But that is not what is being proposed, and that's not what's happening. Here's the problem with what's happening right now. Number one, it changes every day. And the businesses, like I talked to somebody who's got manufacturing clients, and he said half of mine import stuff and half of them build in the United States. That half that import are basically shutting down products. They can't sell them at enough. They're not making any profit. They'd be selling them at a loss. He said the domestic ones, although the tariff could help them, they don't know what it's going to be, so they're not investing. They're waiting to find out what the steady state is. So it's basically frozen everybody, even some of the people that would benefit from these tariffs, because they're mercurial. Like if the president wakes up on the different side of the bed, you get a different tariff that week. The other thing I don't like about what's being done, it's not a broad-based tariff. You have one guy deciding what we need more of and what we need less of. That's central planning. That is not how capitalism works. If it was a broad-based tax, okay. But instead, he's going in and putting punitive taxes that basically are controlling things. They're not meant to raise revenue. They're meant to control things and to control countries. And so that's bad. And it also creates, in the first Trump presidency, it created an entire industry of lobbyists who come to Congress to try to get exemptions. And if you've got powerful lobbyists, you can get an exemption. And then one more thing about tariffs. In the Senate, have you noticed like Rand Paul has forced votes and has voted against tariffs? And there have been no votes in the House. The U.S. law requires us to vote, but we're not doing it. And here's how Speaker Johnson's getting around it. There's a U.S. law that says when a president declares an emergency, within 15 days, any member of the Senate or the House can bring a resolution to the floor countermanding the emergency and get a vote on it. And you don't need 51 votes in the Senate to get it to the floor. And in the House, any member could bring it within 15 days. But the Constitution also says that each chamber can make its own rules. So in the House, as soon as Trump did the emergency, they passed a rule that says a day is not a day for the purposes of this law. What? So not 15 days have transpired, not even a day has transpired since Trump declared the emergency. So we're not even having votes on the emergencies that underlie the tariffs.
What?
But why is the day
What's the
nowadays?
basis?
What's the basis?
Yeah, of the emergency.
I mean, the day.
Oh, he said well,
When did he declare an emergency?
there's no court that gets to say
What's the
that
day?
that's not really an emergency. Like he's got absolute power. Congress gave it to him in the 70s. Like he's saying like fentanyl is an emergency. There's 4 different ways he can do tariffs. He can declare an emergency that's hurting our country's manufacturing production or something. He can say it's a defense emergency. Somehow, using fentanyl coming across the border, he has declared that emergency and is using it to tariff, the Marianas Islands, right? Who are not possibly making fentanyl. Yes.
Kind of what you're saying, everything kind of is like swirling around this one thing, and like the continuing resolution, not trying to get into this, but APAC, every single thing you're saying is like the COVID stuff it's like there's some kind of force out there. I'm not trying to get conspiracy theory, where you can't vote against it. Like pardoning Ross Ulbricht. There's no like pardoning Snowden. We could be the party of like true conservatism of just like slashing. It'd be so cut and dry. But there's like this like kind of force that no one wants to. Not trying to be conspiracy theory, but what the hell is that? Like what is this giant thing that no one wants to say? Like what is it?
Well, there is a uniparty, not to be confused with the Unity Party that Tulsi and RFK Jr. have basically created, but a uniparty in DC. So you've heard of the deep state. We all know what that is. That's basically the administrative state. Those people in those agencies that keep their jobs regardless of who won the election, right? But I've also observed there's a deep Congress. Like, when the majority changes, we keep the same sergeant at arms, the same chaplain, the same doctor, like the congressional doctor, who I don't go to. We keep the same architect of the Capitol, and okay, that's good enough. You would think they're benign and don't affect things, but they do affect things. And then the committee staff doesn't change when congressmen lose their elections. Like, if I lose my election, all of my staff are out of a job. But the staff that work for the Judiciary Committee keep their jobs because they work for the committee. And so this is one reason why term limits aren't going to work as well as you think they are, because there's a deep Congress that doesn't change. And to crack that deep Congress, you have to be there a while and figure out what's going on. Like, I am of, except for the congressman who conspired to put that rule where a day is not a day. Okay, so there's maybe 4 congressmen that knows what's going on there. Because they did it. I am like the only congressman who realized they did it. Like, they're not reading. They put that sentence in a rule change for the big beautiful bill, and no Republican is going to vote against the rule change for the big beautiful bill. And so what they did is they put that rule in there. But there are people on staff who know how to do that. Congressmen don't think of this on their own. You don't get elected in your state talking about health care and taxes and then know how to go to Congress and twist the rules to get a certain outcome. And so it's the deep Congress and it's the uniparty. And then there are a lot of lobbyists. I would not outlaw lobbying. I would outlaw lobbying of foreign countries who are getting foreign aid from coming to our office and taking us on trips overseas and buying our dinner and all that other stuff with 501c3s that are shadows of their lobbying thing so they can get around the lobbyist rules. I would outlaw the foreign lobbying, but I wouldn't outlaw lobbying per se. But they are, most congressmen, this isn't something that's hard to understand unless you are in the moment and you're feeling the pressure. Most of my colleagues are not driving Ferraris, they haven't bought yachts, they don't have a second vacation home. Most of them are no better off than they were when they got elected. Like, if they had a 6-figure job before they got elected, let's say they were a doctor or a dentist, they probably have exactly the same financial profile. Also, their district does not get a shiny new bridge when they vote for the big beautiful bill, like when they sell out. The reason they quote sell out, it's not even proper to call it a sellout because they're not getting anything. It's pure pressure. It's just like they want to be able to go to dinner that night and not have everybody at the table hate them. And they're separated from their families. They're up there and they want to be liked by the people around them.
But I think that's what makes you kind of like likable is the one thing, like, the reason why I came here is you voted against the continuing resolution. Like, when I saw that happened, I was like, dude, this guy's like the one guy even standing up to Trump. Like, that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
you're like the one dude. Like, how is that not cool to everyone? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here's the good
Yeah,
news.
you're the cool guy.
No. Here's the good news, though. To your point, how could it change? Because I have hope or I wouldn't be here, right? I know either I am broadcasting hope, right? I'm like the one person who's trying to tell you there is hope. But here's how it could change. There's 220 Republicans, let's say, in the House of Representatives. 30 of them wake up every day and do the wrong thing. when the right thing would suit them better. Like the right thing would get them more votes, they could raise more money. Why are they doing the wrong thing? I don't know, but there's 30 of them out of 220 that can never bring themselves to do the right thing. Maybe they are corrupt. Maybe they got corrupted. Maybe they owe too many people too many things in order to get reelected, and they can't break out of that system. But there's only about 30 of them. Okay, then there's 30 of the 220 that wake up and try to do the right thing every day. This would be most of the Freedom Caucus, but not all of them. Some of them are in there to have a better brand, so they can go back home to a conservative district and say, what do you mean I'm not conservative? I'm in the Freedom Caucus, which is one of the big reasons I won't join the Freedom Caucus. I'm not going to burnish their credentials. Like, I started the Second Amendment Caucus, and I refused to publish who's in it. Because you're, right? I didn't create the caucus to burnish your credentials. Your credentials are how you vote.
And there's Democrats in that, right?
No.
Didn't you get like concealed carry for people in DC or something like that?
Yes,
Like
and I've been, and I don't say this in the news, but I got about 3 or 4 dozen congressmen trained and gotten them their concealed carry permits in DC, doing that behind the scenes. Yeah, I can tell you one-on-one more about guns in DC. There's a lot more of them than you realize. So there's 30 that do the wrong thing, 30 that try to do the right thing. And what's the other 160? What's their program? What's their algorithm?
The wind.
Yes! They are going along to get along. And their whole existence, their whole plan is to make as many friends as they can and not to piss off the leadership so that they could get something for their district. It's not a bad algorithm, right? Like if you're one of the 30 who goes against the wind, then you fall out of favor and they'll run ads and say you're not effective. So there's 160 people trying to be effective. And they've decided the way to be most effective is to make sure when they vote for the speaker, they vote for the guy that's going to win, right? Because the consequence of not doing that is your bill's not coming to the floor. And they want to get a bill to the floor. So 160 of them are following whoever prevails. And the bad news is, the 30 who do the wrong thing, they always prevail. They with a few exceptions, like Jim Jordan is chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He's one of the 30 who does the right thing, and he made it to chairman. But when he tried to become speaker, the 30 who always do the wrong thing were ready to lose their re-elections to keep him from, and some of them did. They fell on their swords to keep Jim Jordan, to protect the swamp. They stopped him from becoming speaker. But if Jim Jordan had become speaker, he would have had 160 lieutenants ready to fight whatever hill he said to charge, plus the 30 who do the right thing. So if we could, to your point, how could we change things? If we could go from 30 bad guys to 15, like take 15 of them out in the primary, and then go from 30 good guys to 60, overnight it would change. Because Jim Jordan could be speaker, and then you could get things done that would be truly conservative. It's, so I have hope in that regard. Yeah.
Well, just on that note, who is it that wanted Mike Johnson to be the speaker?
Good question.
Who was that? And I actually heard an interview with him, and he sounded great before he got in, but then he's turned out to be exactly the opposite of what he sounded like.
I said,
Let me just say that we have to leave by 8 to
Okay.
catch our flight, and please answer this
Yeah.
question and then make a closing
okay,
remarks.
good deal. So, and then that might leave us a few minutes to take pictures
Yes,
or something.
that's right.
Okay. Well, part of Mike Johnson's problem is he's the most unlikely guy to be speaker, so he thinks God did it. And so he's divinely inspired, which means he hears voices nobody else can hear, and he can do no wrong. If he won the lottery, God had made that lottery happen, and so now he is fully certain that he's supposed to be the guy. Somebody who's wrong is dangerous, but somebody who's wrong and is deeply convicted that they're right is really bad. And they will do unnatural things. They'll lie to your face. They'll do whatever it takes because God told them it was okay to lie today. Like, that's his weird situation, in my opinion. I actually think getting rid of Kevin McCarthy was a big mistake. He put me on the rules committee. I was getting separate votes on separate bills. I was forcing votes on things like on vaccines, electronic ID on cattle, I got a vote on whether the Department of Education should exist. I put all these, like my strategy was get on rules committee and use that position to force all these votes to happen. And I was making them happen. And we were doing 12 separate bills. And it only took like 8 members of Congress, who are my friends, but they took him out, and it was a big mistake. Because everybody at least knew Kevin wasn't a dyed-in-the-wool conservative. He was actually competent at the job. Mike Johnson's not even competent. He was competent, and he was transactional. And you could cut deals, and he would keep the deal. And that was the difference. So when he went away, the whole structure that had been established in order to allow him to be speaker, right? He had a hard time becoming speaker. I helped broker the deal where he could be speaker if he put 3 of us on the rules committee, which we had a blocking position there. And we actually changed the course of Congress every week that way. When he was gone, all the deals went off the table with Kevin. There were no more transactions. And the way Mike became speaker was we voted for like 6 different people. And it was laborious, and people were just so tired of voting and going to the floor and voting and looking like idiots because we couldn't elect a speaker. So they found the one guy nobody disliked, and that was Mike Johnson, because he had never done anything. So, and then he became the speaker, and then he faked it until he made it. And he is, in the beginning he was a lost ball in tall weeds, and but now he's gotten pretty good at zigging and zagging, and I think he's pulled the wool over the president's eyes a few times. And I predicted at the beginning of this Congress, I predicted there were 3 things that were going to collide. Elon Musk was going to figure out he's dealing with idiots and liars. And you don't get rockets to land themselves backwards, and you don't get cars to drive themselves when you ignore the idiots in your organization or the liars in your organization. And I knew he would eventually figure it out. When we were at the State of the Union, and Trump was rattling off a list of Doge things that had been found already that were ridiculous things we had wasted money on, and we weren't going to spend this money on it again. My colleagues, like every Republican, stood up and clapped like seals. And I'm thinking, no, this is an indictment of all of you. You spent this money. Why are you clapping that they found the money that you misappropriated? And then, but it worked for them because the people didn't realize. They think there's like some other branch of government that wasted all this money. No, it was Congress. And it wasn't actually a waste. They wanted to spend that money in those places because it goes to things they like, or to lobbyists who's convinced them to do it. It's not as much of a mistake as it might seem. But that's the easiest way to explain the malfeasance. Oh, sorry, we didn't mean to give $20 billion to USAID to, do all this stuff. Of course they did. And especially the committee staff, the Deep Congress. They write those bills, and they direct where that money goes. So who wanted Mike Johnson? That's who wanted Mike Johnson. Everybody just wanted it to be over, and they found the guy nobody hated, nobody disliked. And now that he is the speaker, the cost of trying to replace him is too great. And if you want to know how long he's going to be speaker, he'll be speaker until Trump decides he's not speaker. Because that's how much pull Trump has now over the members of Congress. But I'll close by saying this. There's one guy he does not control. And I agree with him 85% of the time. But in the 15%, one of my friends who's no longer in Congress, Louis Gohmert, we were sitting in one of these things where the speaker gets up and he tells you, you got to do this, and then somebody's planted in the crowd to get up and say, we need to follow the speaker. And they give a little speech and they say, look, when the quarterback calls the play, and snaps the ball, you don't run your own play, you know, as if this is a quarterback game or whatever. And Louis Gohmert turned to me and he said, if my quarterback snaps the ball and runs for the wrong end zone, I ain't blocking for it. I might even have tackling. But when your team is doing the wrong thing, it doesn't matter what the president says. You just got to keep doing the right thing. So that's what I will do. I will just do what I think is right. I might be wrong some days. I hope you realize today I'm just a regular person. Mm-hmm. I could get it wrong. But when I do something, it's because I believe it is the right answer. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I appreciate you all being here and helping me go back to the swamp where I can do more of it. Thank you, and God bless you. Happy birthday, Kelly.
Oh.
We're gonna have a photo line so we can do it efficiently. If you'd like to have a photo